What's an injury you sustained and lied about how it actually happened because it was just too embarrassing? Very late to the party, but here we go. Not me, but my best friend in high school, for some reason or another, thought if he didn't soil it eventually, his body would just absorb and digest 100% of the matter and make it into energy. Admittedly, for about the first 3 to 5 days, it was a painful battle, but he was able to keep it all in him. After that, the pains he was feeling sort of went away. Fast forward maybe a week or two, we go to Costco for lunch, buck fifty hot dogs, and while we're at the table eating, I see a lot of agonizing pain go across his face. He said he has to go to the bathroom and that he'll meet me outside. Now, this is when things get real. He knew that at that moment his experiment had failed and that the time to release the mess was now. He got to a stall and started to push, except it wasn't all coming out. It had started normal enough, but very quickly his soil grew in diameter and he couldn't push it anymore. He found out later that what had happened was that his mess had essentially dried up and hardened inside of him. Knowing that this wasn't going to come out on its own, he somehow managed to crab walk from the toilet to the sink, take the mirror off the wall, place it on the floor, squat over it, and for sanitary concerns, wrapped his hands to his elbows in toilet paper. At that point, he assumed the position, grabbed on with both hands, and with a push-pull technique, released the plug of pressure and everything else that was built up behind it and instantly passed out. This is where I re-enter the story. After almost an hour of waiting in a Costco parking lot, I go to the customer service desk, inform them that my friend has been in the bathroom for a long time and that maybe someone should check on him. I was greeted with a very odd look from an old lady at the counter who then followed me to the restroom with a few set of keys. I then opened the door to see my best friend face down on a mirror with half of his arms wrapped up like a bad mummy costume on Halloween. Needless to say, paramedics were called. Then he had to explain to his parents, doctors, and Costco managers what happened and why he thought not soiling was a good idea. But because I was a good friend, when everyone asked why he wasn't at school for a week, I said we got hammered of a drink from every bottle in my parents' liquor cabinet, so nothing looked empty, climbed a tree in my backyard, and that he fell. This is the first time I've ever told anyone this story. So, right, I do not like imagining that in my head, but his friend turned Costco into a battlefield fighting the ultimate enemy, his own digestive system? Pushing and pulling? How's that work out? Story 2. Finally, a story I can share. I was playing football, soccer, with a bunch of friends. I was 12. Since we were all still school kids, one team was usually going to steamroll the other. On this occasion, I happened to be the keeper on the winning team, so I had nothing to do and I was really bored. I decided it was a good time to do some pull-ups, and so I grabbed the crossbar of the goalpost and pulled myself up. Once I was on top, I stuck out my legs for fun, and then I got them stuck in the net. I ended up falling to the ground and I stuck out my hands to prevent myself from breaking my own neck. I eventually found out that I had broken my left wrist. What I told my parents, and the doctor too, LOL, was that I was running after the ball and tripped over something, thus causing me to fall and break my wrist. Story 3. I was hammered and fell in the parking lot of my friend's apartment at her birthday party. The birthday party just so happened to be the night before a second date with this really cute girl I met on Tinder. I went on the date and told the girl that a dog at work had knocked me over and I fell on my face. I work with dogs, and me being put down by a Great Dane or some other huge pup isn't unusual, and she understood. While on the date, some guys came up to me and rudely asked me what happened to my face. My Tinder date grabbed my hand and made up some story about how I got in a fight defending her honor in a bar or sort of some nonsense like that. I could barely keep a straight face while she was telling the story, but she sold the stuff out of it. It wasn't until a few days later I told her the real story of how I got hurt. Tinder date and I are getting married soon. So his future spouse is a definite keeper, no doubt about that, turning his accident into a chivalrous legend. Talk about a supportive partner. Story 4. An ex-boyfriend and I were once getting spicy, and he was repeatedly tapping me in the face while holding me. Granted, it was a little harder than I preferred, but it wasn't unbearable or anything. He suddenly stopped a few minutes later, eyes wide in awe. "Did I do that?" he asked. "Do what?" "Your face is all bruised." "It's fine, I'll look at it later," I said dismissively. So later comes around and I look in the mirror to see a purple handprint outlined across my cheeks. Even the lines of his hands were painted on my face. My parents didn't know I was dating him, and they certainly didn't think I was having intimacy, especially like that. On my way home, I stopped at Ulta and got color correcting makeup, piled it on using the mirror in my car, and wore my hair down and slightly over my face. My parents could still see some bruising though, and when they asked what happened, I told them this absolute whopper. So I was driving home from work and dropped my water bottle. It started to roll as if it was going to get in the way of the brake pedal, so I bent down to grab it. While I was still kind of bent down, a cat ran into the road, and when I slammed on the brakes, I hit my face on the wheel. Story 5. I broke my wrist in gym class playing kickball when I was around 16 or 17. The grass was wet, the girl on first base was a big and lazy girl, and I was in the shortstop position, so when I saw a kick go straight along the baseline, I knew what to expect. Girl didn't even bend down to try and stop it, just kind of waved one arm at her side. So I was running to try and get to it, stopping it with one arm, but the grass was super wet and my feet just kept going. I fell down hard and had my left arm behind me to brace the fall. The only cool part of the story is that I finished out the rest of the game with what should have been a very obviously broken wrist. I went to the gym teacher afterwards and asked if I could go to the nurse's office for an ice pack before getting changed. He was just like, oh no, that's broken. He flagged a kid to escort me to the nurses, and after a bit of walking and going up the stairs and the adrenaline wearing off, I went into shock and fainted. I told everyone in my first few years of college that it happened playing high school soccer instead of gym class kickball. I didn't play soccer in high school. Story 6. My dad and I were roughhousing after my sister's graduation party. Drinks were involved, and he fake suplexed me and I broke something. Honestly, I shrugged it off because of the drinks, but the next day the side of my chest was black and blue and it was extremely painful to sneeze, cough, hiccup, or even lay in bed. It was miserable. The thing is, my other sister turned out to be a mistreating royal witch. She was a chronic habitual liar and would do anything to get you back for some perceived injustice, no matter the consequences. She was, and still is, a horrible person, and luckily she left all of our lives about 6 years ago. Good riddance. Around that same time, she was attempting to bring child maltreatment charges against my dad for refusing to buy her a car for her 16th birthday by making stuff up about what happened to her when she was younger. This was doubly bad because my dad is a government contractor with a security clearance, and she knew even alleging this would ruin his career. Anyway, I went disc golfing with my friends the next day and got hit with the disc in the rib so I could go to the doctor and not generate false evidence against my dad. There was inevitably an investigation, and my other sister and I were extensively interviewed, and eventually all allegations dropped, and there was, thankfully, no detriment to his career. This was over 10 years ago, and he still doesn't know that I might have completely saved his life. He still thinks I broke it playing disc golf. Well, maybe you should tell him, depending on the type of guy he is, and so far, based on this story, you guys are pretty close. He might actually find it funny and be even more thankful than normal, especially since he has kept it for this long. Story 7. Girls I went to high school with were in an absolutely horrific crash. No one really knew the whole story, but they were both in the hospital for months. One girl broke her back and the other her neck. 2 boys were in the car too. The story was that they lost control of the car on a dirt road, very common occurrence where we lived and definitely something people sympathize with in that sometimes these things happen, Way. No one knows I know this, but I was walking behind one of the girls later in high school while she was working on a school computer in the computer lab. It only took a second of me seeing it out of the corner of my eye, but it got my attention and I read what she had written while going by. They were drinking. She was sitting in the front seat and thought it would be hilarious to grab the wheel while her boyfriend was driving and wrench it out of his hands. Drinking and driving, and she grabs the wheel away from the driver while on a dirt road. She could have ended 4 people. She was writing a kind of confessional story or something. I remember it started with something like, "What if I told you I had a secret?" or something similar like that. This isn't out of the ordinary because we had a teacher who got us to do large collections of different types of writings twice per year. Though I did feel maybe that was a bit intense for one of those assignments. Perhaps she just needed to get it out. I have not told a single person to this day that I know this, and I read that. Story 8. My traumatic brain injury. For 2 years, I maintained that it was caused by a fall on the stairs. It was actually caused by a solid swing during a mistreatment overseas. Majorca, Spain. My parents knew that I was harmed there because I awkwardly and numbly gave them scant details via Skype, insisting that they not make eye contact with me and that they not ask for details. But I was too ashamed to admit how bad it really was, in more ways than one. I kept up the oops, I hit the stairs lie for a couple of years, but eventually, with the TBI acting up and my anxieties steadily worsening, I eventually came clean about it. So I cried for a solid hour when I finally explained to my parents and friend what really happened. That was last year, and as embarrassing as it was, as much as I hated having to explain, I got through it. Sadly, there was no way to honestly explain the circumstances behind my head injury without at least mentioning some details of the mistreatment, which, though mentioned without any details, was still understandably difficult for them to hear and almost physically painful for me to say. But it was also an immense relief just getting that off of my chest. I remember thinking how strange it was that I could actually breathe properly again after I came clean about what happened. The pressure and the anxiety had been literally strangling me. Story 9. I wasn't actually the one doing the lying. In my senior year of high school, I got a black eye in the gym when we were playing Knockout, a basketball game where people get in a line and two people try to shoot at the same time to knock each other out. The kid I was playing against went to shoot as I bent down to get my ball and he elbowed me by accident. I went to the nurse. It looked way worse than it was, but the nurse freaked out and made my mom pick me up, so I missed 8th and 9th period. The next day, I walked into my 8th period class, AP Psychology, and before I could say anything, my teacher saw me and addressed the class. So, Gerald here was walking home yesterday when he saw a little girl getting attacked by a group of thugs, and he fought all of them off and saved her life, but got this black eye during the fight. Let's all give him a round of applause, and everyone clapped. My friend whispered to me, "Whoa, really?" And I was like, "Nah, of course not." And he got all disappointed. Story 10. I got a fracture in high school. I have 7 screws and a plate in my right hand and a pretty gnarly scar. My knuckles also don't look quite right. I tell people I broke it falling off of my bike. In reality, it was at our high school's lock-in for graduation. All the high school seniors were stuck in the high school to tire us out the weekend of graduation in an attempt to keep us safe so no one goes out, gets hammered, and gets in a car accident the night before graduation. Happened a few times at my school, actually. There was food, events, movies in some classrooms, etc. Even a mechanical bull and a blow-up pit. There was a smaller workout room where they had a intoxicated driving activity. There was an adult-sized tricycle and a pair of intoxicated driving glasses that simulates what visual plane you'd see if you were intoxicated. I made it one time around the quarter-mile track and went to take the bike back to the main door. Well, I got thrown off by the glasses and ran clean into the corner of the brick wall. Because my hand was around the handlebars of the bike, my hand just got destroyed. Apparently, it was such an intense fracture that my hand surgeon had to consult several studies on hand surgery prior to my own surgery. Story 11. When I was in first grade, I stuck a bean in my ear. Yep. Class was really boring and we'd been using beans probably for some math exercise, so I was just fiddling around with them, stuck the bean in, tried to get it out, couldn't reach it. It hurt a lot, so I went to the nurse and feigned ignorance. The nurse used the ear thingy to look into my ear. I don't know why she didn't see the bean and decided it was an ear infection. My mom picked me up and took me to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, a fact I only found out some 20 years later when I visited an ENT last week and recognized a chair. Naturally, they noticed pretty much immediately that there was something stuck in my ear. They struggled to figure out how to get it out, and the nurse had the idea to use the irrigation machine and use water pressure to force it out. Worked like a charm. My mom says I claimed I didn't tell her because I didn't want to get into trouble, but I distinctly remember being embarrassed at my stupidity. Story 12. For starters, happy cake day. This happened to a friend of mine, though a group of us were involved. So we all had to get the story straight. We were playing mailbox baseball in some of our nicer neighborhoods. We had taken a turn and were just being obnoxious as could be when our less than athletic friend was up to bat. He totally missed the first mailbox and almost fell out of the car window. The next one he hit, though, he didn't knock the box off the post. He was complaining that the bat had vibrated his arm. I knew what he was talking about, that numbing electric shock that goes all up your arm when you hit the ball wrong. So he said, just choke up a little bit, not really thinking that we should stop now. A couple houses down the dark road, we see a good opportunity and tell him to get ready. So I guess he was not ready and didn't know what choke up meant because when he hit the box, the bat rebounded back into his head and hit the car. He curled up holding the side of his head. After a few oh, ah, and oh no's, we went to his place and told his mom that we had stopped at the Taco Bell on the reservation and that we were jumped by some Indian kids to explain why he was covered in red liquid and why there was a dent in the car door. Story 13. I fractured my toe because I was running into the kitchen trying not to get caught eating in the living room and fell up one stair. Like many parents, mine did not like my sister and I eating on the couch. Well, one day my sister and I were chilling, watching TV, eating ice cream out of the carton since we got home from school early. Now, usually my parents get home at 4, not today though. So we were watching TV and I hear a doorknob jingle and I mute the TV and go, "You hear that?" Now, me being so young, I really couldn't imagine my parents being home so early. Breaking routines doesn't make sense to a middle schooler. Well, this day they did. So my sister, being the genius she is, hides the ice cream next to the couch out of view. But my stupid self is eating my mom's favorite ice cream. It needs to be returned. So I sprint from the couch to the fridge, slam my toe into the front of the only stair connecting the living room to the kitchen, fall, and drop ice cream all over the floor. Somehow my mom ends up dropping her keys or something that gives me enough time to lazily clean the floor with the nearest rag and return the ice cream. I swear all of this happened in like 20 seconds because I do not know how she did not catch me. I ended up having football practice later. I was limping everywhere for at least a month or two. My mom asked me what happened and I told her I hurt my toe at practice. The season had just started. She never believed that it hurt my toe either and that I was just faking, but that's fine, as long as she knows I was not eating in her living room. Story 14. My friend and I were playing Soul Calibur 3 and he kept beating me doing some cheesy things and I got so mad I punched the wall. Immediately I felt searing hot pain in my pinky. I panicked and concealed the injury until I could find a better way to pass it off. 2 days later at football practice, I was at the bottom of a pile with the football in my now bum pinky hand and decided to check my chances, yelled out real loud in pain and said the football had been jammed down into my pinky and it hurt really bad. Coach took one look at my crooked pinky and called my parents to take me to the doctor. Turns out when I punched the wall, I had torn the tendons in my pinky and needed surgery to correct it. After the surgery was done, the doctor said that there was more scar tissue than they expected and asked if I might have injured my hand before the football practice. Lied through my teeth and got away with it, although I still can't bend my pinky finger past a certain point anymore. Story 15. In the high school marching band, the collar guard for this particular show was armed with sabers. But during practice, one of them went to the wrong set, did the wrong work, and was 5 steps behind. The wrong place she ended up was about a foot in front of me too and to the right. The wrong work she ended up doing was turning and doing an uppercut with the saber in a large circle, ending with it going upwards. I'm still standing still with my feet a foot apart and she hit me in the jewels. And she didn't just hit me in the jewels, she lifted me an inch off the ground, popped one of them, put a scar and even bruised and fractured me. I still marched the rest of the show before falling down on my knees and screaming so loud. I don't tell the band just how bad the injury was in fear of having another nickname. I don't quite have the same I used to either, and the get well soon cards were hilarious. Years later, though, I insist I once had cancer. Only the marching band may know the truth. Story 16. I broke my toe running from a bee. I'm a huge wuss about stingy bees, so when a bee got in my hair, I freaked out. I ran toward the house, lost my balance, kicked the concrete step of my mom's porch, and fell backwards. Mom was sitting on the porch and I accidentally hurt her before crashing to the ground. She was laughing so hard she couldn't help me up and I was laughing so hard I couldn't get up. I was super embarrassed for a while and just told everyone I tripped. I got over the shame because it was pretty funny, so I don't lie about it anymore. And if you're enjoying and getting entertained by at least one of these stories so far, there's more coming up. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. I have a wound scar on my left bicep. When I was younger and attractive girls asked me how it happened, I would tell them it happened during a fight where someone pulled the weapon on me. Actually, I worked in a butcher shop of a market when I was in my late teens. Part of my job was to collect all the carving utensils from the prep area, put them into a large plastic bin, and carry them behind the deli case to the kitchen to wash. One time, coming back out of the kitchen, I failed to notice that someone had opened the trap door to the basement in my direct path. While I was in the kitchen, the plastic bin obscured my view. I took one fateful step opposite to the stair side and tumbled into the basement, with the contents of the bin raining down around me. Somehow I escaped with only a twisted ankle and the aforementioned wound in my arm for which I had to go to the ER for stitches. I'll always remember being dazed, sitting at the bottom of the stairs looking up and seeing utensils embedded in one of the steps. Story 18. I haven't actually lied about it, but depending on who I'm talking to, I have been leaving out some, important details. I got my wife an electric scooter for her birthday. The day she got it, we went out for a ride. I was on my electric skateboard. It had recently rained a bit, so the pavement was a little wet, but not too bad as long as you were careful. I got the idea to pretend to gas and get a speed boost from it, so I made a gassing sound and totally nailed it. Since the pavement was damp, my board slid out from under me and I went down directly in front of my wife. She didn't have time to stop, so she also fell. We both got some scrapes and bruises. Unfortunately, she got it worse than I did. When telling the story, I left out the gas boost part if it's someone I'm not really close to. Story 19. The morning after the first time I spent the night with my now husband, he made egg burritos for us for breakfast. We started fooling around after eating and he hadn't washed his hands thoroughly enough to get the habanero off, apparently. After a couple of days of still being in absolute misery in my area, I broke down and called my mom asking for the doctor's number. I was 22. My mother offered to make the appointment for me and asked what was wrong. Instead of telling her I'd slept with a stupid dude who injured my area in the worst way and I need to get a full screening while I'm at it, I told her I thought I had a yeast infection. I had to wait 2 weeks for the appointment. I get to check in with the nurse, and as soon as she says yeast infection, I start crying, telling her what actually happened, why I lied, and she tells me not to worry while trying to keep professional and not laugh. They did what they do and gave me a cream for my chemical burn and an antibiotic. When I get home, my mom sees my prescription cream, instantly freaks out and asks me what happened. I come clean, she laughs hysterically. The moment my dad walks in the door, she tells him. They both laugh hysterically. Nearly 10 years later, any chance they get to bring it up and laugh hysterically should have just stuck with the lie. Story 20. When I was about 15, I was dared to punch a pole for $50. I have no idea why I took the dare. I guess I thought it was an easy $50. I proceeded to punch the pole. It really didn't hurt too much. Later in the day, it started to swell pretty badly with major throbbing and I was worried I broke it, so I had to tell my parents how it happened. Of course I lied, because I was truly embarrassed and scared how they would react. I said I was running from a friend and fell on my hand, which my parents believed, but my brother was there when I took the bet and he then told them the truth, which made me really angry. I had terrible anger management at that age, so I punched a door in my house with my other hand. What a huge mistake that was, lol. Same thing started to happen to that hand. My parents took me to my PCP and told me I had broken my metacarpal bone in both hands. I ended up with both hands in a cast for about 6 weeks. It makes me cringe when I look back on it, such an embarrassing moment in my life. Trying to lie about the situation just made everything worse. Story 21. A treat for anyone sorting by new, not me, but a friend, was being an idiot in grade 8, dancing on top of a desk in class while another friend was trying to hit his feet. Desks tipped over, guy fell on the edge and still has a giant indent in his shin to this day. Happened 22 years ago. He told the teachers and his mom he ran into an overturned desk. Now this one is me. In elementary school recess, it's hot outside. I either found or stole this tiny plastic earring from someone. It was the early mid-90s, so it was a fully plastic earring, including the post, no metal. I was chewing on it inside my mouth. I know, disgusting, but it was a malleable plastic, so it was quite satisfying to chew on. Recess was almost over and I was showing off, hanging on these boot cleaner bars outside the school doors. I slipped and swallowed the damn earring. Did I mention it was red in the shape of a captain's wheel on a pirate ship? I swallowed it and it hurt like nothing I had experienced either before or since. I went running into the school. A teacher came racing out to see what was going on and I kept saying, I ate something but I don't know what. So she gets me to the water fountain to start drinking. Such a bad lie. I didn't know at the time, but she immediately thought anaphylaxis and raced off to phone my mom to come get me. I ended up going to the hospital with my mom, but it gets worse. Again, stupid kid, very embarrassed that I swallowed an earring that I knew I shouldn't have put in my mouth in the first place. I was 11. I really knew better. I said I had an earring in my hand. I fell down and I inhaled it. Yep, that was the word I choose to use, inhaled. So even though my throat just feels raw now and I'm otherwise fine, everyone is doing their due diligence to find out where this damn earring is inside of me. my digestive system, my lungs, stuck in my throat. I had several x-rays, but of course nothing was found. They told my mom, this too shall pass, and that was it. It wasn't until years later that I put together the fact that the earring was completely plastic and would not show up on any x-ray. I remember they asked what kind of an earring it was and what it looked like and what it was made of. I think all of my answers were, I don't know. I was so freaking embarrassed. It was part of what started my battle with panic disorder. Only part. Life is complicated. Yep, the old, I was running with an earring in my hand and fell down and I don't know, but I just inhaled it routine. Don't you just hate it when that happens, you know? Story 22. I used to play recreational baseball in middle school and we were finally allowed to remove the masks from our helmets for batting. I took mine off midway through the season. Apparently, one of the metal washers on the screws got lost in the padding inside the helmet. Fast forward a couple of weeks into the season, I hit a double to left field. The next batter came up and hit a line drive right at the shortstop. I thought it was over his head, but it wasn't, and I got doubled off because I had started to run to third base. Pretty angry at myself for getting out, I kicked the base out of frustration and tripped over the bag, falling hard on my head. I was immediately unconscious. I had to leave the game and go to the hospital where I received 6 stitches. However, there were no signs of a concussion. A couple of people asked about the stitches because they had to cut some of my hair to apply them. Naturally, I told them it was because I had slid back to second base head first and got cleated on in the head by the second baseman. Story 23. I have a scar on my forehead from when I was having a sponge play fight in the tub with my friend. I, 8 years old, had this brilliant idea to stand up really quick to attack her from above and I slipped, hitting my head on the tap handle of the basin adjacent to the bath. It was super weird because I didn't feel anything, so I just sort of went back to playing. The absolutely petrified look on my friend's face made me stop and notice the red liquid in the tub. When I finally looked into the mirror, I freaked out. My mom rushed us both to the hospital and my friend was told to sit in the corner. Trying to explain the very obvious stitches on my forehead at school was a struggle. It still kind of shows, actually. Story 24. Oh my God. Okay, so I went to Cuba with my family because we were taking our sister there for baseball. We were at this hotel with a big eating area along with a buffet. When we went in for breakfast in the morning, I was getting toast from the toaster. This is one of those big toasters where you put your bread through the top and eventually turns to toast as it cooks through its journey to the bottom. Well, I was getting my toast when I accidentally touched my finger up against the toaster and mildly burnt it. It was red and it was very clear something was up with my hand. It wasn't hurting and it was only just a little sting when I got burnt. So I decided not to tell anyone about it because I didn't want to draw attention from the team. It was a really stupid idea because my family ended up getting concerned and speculated that it might be some kind of infection or I burnt myself, which I did. We were on a bus to a school and my mom started talking about it. My sister's teammates started looking at my hand and I felt kind of guilty for not saying anything from the start to cause panic, LMAO. It was about a year later that I told my mom the truth. Story 25. I bet this will get buried, but this is the post for me. This happened in year 9 when I was 14. I'm now 22. So one day I was cycling back home from school and took a shortcut through this big empty car park. I had football, proper football, practice that day and as a result had an extra hold-all for my kit which I had foolishly decided to hang off of my right handlebar. So thanks to Sod's Law, the bag started swinging and hit my wheel, jamming it and I went over the handlebars. I was lucky and only ended up with a few bruises, in particular one above my eyebrow so I had something trickling down my face. Me being the schmuck I was at that age decided not to wipe it off and consequently scared the living hell out of my mom when I got home. She kicked off, the interrogation started and I was bombarded with questions of where, how, why, when, and who. For some reason I thought it'd be a good idea to lie and say that I'd been hit by a bus. Don't ask me why I said bus, but I said bus and Christ knows why she bought it. She took me to the main bus station in my town and demanded CCTV footage to show what I had alleged had happened. I knew the road and said it must have been in a blind spot. Oops. For all of my efforts, I get a 15-pound iTunes voucher, a guilty conscience, and a fear of road cycling. Story 26. Throwaway because I'm just too embarrassed even in my own Reddit identity. So I'm a dude and had just started experimenting with dudes. I met this guy for a pretty long and hot session. We spent quite a bit of time on his bed. He liked to rest his chin on mine and had this short, prickly stubble that was a little annoying, but hey, I can deal for some fun times. Afterward, I noticed the front part of my chin felt a bit funny and warm. I look in the mirror and my chin is super red and a bit swollen. Over the next few days, the chin skin behaved just like a burn. There was leaky, pinpoint open sore areas that then scabbed over. It took a week to heal and during that time I had to go to work at a hospital. I wasn't out, and you wouldn't get this kind of injury making out with a girl, so I was hooped. It would have invited just as many questions if I covered it up, so I just let my scab chin skin show. I mostly played dumb and said I had no idea how it happened. It was a spontaneous reaction to something. It seems to be getting better. People thought it looked like a scrape, maybe from a bike wipeout, but though it was tempting to use that, I knew it would be a lot more work to come up with an accident story, so I played that down. I was a lot more careful when making out with stubbly dudes after that. Story 27. This will probably get buried, but I attempted a backflip at a Spartan race in anticipation of the awesomeness of the upcoming event a few minutes before the actual start of the race. I had completed probably 20 backflips goofing around, many times in full business casual work attire. Never once messed one up. The excitement of the day must have gotten to me and I overjumped up but didn't rotate enough. To give some background, I'm pretty light and lanky, and for some reason I was blessed with the vertical leap of an NFL wide receiver. So here I am, center of mass about 40 inches off the ground, body rotating around my midsection with my eyes shut as they normally were when I did a backflip. No idea that my face was about to come down from 9 feet in the air and halt the weight of my body on top of it, in addition to any angular momentum along for the ride. The ground wasn't concrete, but it may as well have been. A once grassy field stamped down from thousands of people walking from the registration tent to the Spartan village, the area that people hung out in before their race started. Not much grass was left. And did I mention the collective, oh, from 100 onlookers? Not sure which hurt more, my pride or my face. I'm kidding. It was my face. So bad. Definitely my face. I told people that I felt during the race. Slightly more respectable, I guess. Story 28. I was watching YouTube on my laptop when laptops were big and clunky. This is important. At midnight, around 13, 14 years of age, I was laying down with my knees up and got startled by a jump scare causing the laptop to come crashing down onto my face, thus hitting my nose pretty hard. I just lay there in frustration but decided not to go check on it because, it probably wasn't that bad and I was super tired. The next day I get up and look in the mirror to find my nose 3 times its normal size. It's not broken, but it's really messed up. I went to school and told my friends and everyone else who asked that I got in a fight with a neighbor who was my age and she hurt me in the nose. Looking back, this was extremely idiotic on a few levels. One, I was really shy in middle school, so the idea of me getting into a fight is actually unbelievable. And two, if I had gotten into a fight, it didn't reflect well on me at all to have been clocked in the nose pretty hard. Needless to say, after that fiasco, I got a lot better at laughing at myself. Story 29. I used to do weightlifting in high school, so I carried around a hydro flask with me all day to stay hydrated. 40 ounces, for those of you who don't know what a hydro is, it's a heavy stainless steel flask. Could easily give someone a concussion with a full one if you wanted to. Well, I would walk around campus hitting my hydro against my knee as I walked because. I guess it weakened my knee after some time and I collapsed while back squatting and got a subluxated patella. I wore a knee brace for about a month and after that I couldn't weightlift for a whole year. To this day, my knees go snap, crackle, pop at nearly every movement, especially when I'm sitting on the floor and going to get up. I can't ride my boy as much because every bounce, my knee pops. It's ridiculous. I hate it. To the lie part, my parents and family never approved of my weightlifting. They thought it was stupid. I only went into weightlifting because my family constantly demeans me and calls me overweight and fat, tried to regulate my meals and wouldn't let me eat unless they portioned it. I felt even more depressed than ever. If they knew that my knee accident happened from weightlifting, I'd get so many "I told you so's," and I don't want to deal with their BS. So I made up a lie and told them I stumbled down the bleachers instead. Oops, my knees kept popping and my mom wanted to get x-rays done, and I always denied them in case she figured out what happened. Now that I'm on my own, I'm wondering if I should go get x-rays and see if there was any long-term damage and I messed myself over by not seeing a doctor or doing anything sooner. Story 30. Dude, I have a story for this. In 5th grade, I played spring ball, 8-on-8 football that was essentially begging for anyone to play. They centered everything around making sure people could play at all, which is why the divisions were based solely on your grade and not your age or weight. There weren't any weight classes. Well, my team was about as young and as small as you could possibly be. We had 3 decently sized players. One was our star RB, one was an okay but just unathletic TE, and the last one, Sam, was a backup OL. Sam was the biggest wuss I've ever met in my entire life. His mom, not even his dad, was forcing him to play football because, well, he was such a wuss. Well, anyway, our season went about as you would expect. We got stomped on every single game, with mercy rules being enacted by the end of the first quarter, and our star RB literally put the team on his back every single play. More than that, he was the second most talented player I've ever played with in my life, and I've played with countless D1 players and a few that are currently pros. Not saying I was good, just everyone around me. Well, one week we got stomped and it went just like every other week. Bums we were, dear God. But our star RB still had like 3 TDs and 200 yards as our only form of offense and defense, and he walked out of the game no worse than usual. Then, come practice Monday, our star RB doesn't show up. It was a real holy cow.jpg moment from our HC, who, by the way, wasn't even our original HC. Our first HC was actually a set of adult twins that bailed on the team after less than a month because we were so bad, so the OL coach got promoted to HC, and he was the only one left. Well, I digress. So practice without our star RB went horribly. Every single player on the team was scared to tackle, so he just made us run as we kept missing tackles. Almost all intentional misses, no doubt. Finally, at the end of the practice, this dude shows up with his daddy in a limp you could spot from a mile away. Our coach goes up to him, asks him what is up, and he gets all embarrassed trying to explain why he wasn't at practice and why he was going to miss next week's game. Turns out this white dude had spicy Mexican food the night before and had the mess so bad he tore his bum. So while we were out there missing tackles and jogging in practice, he was at the emergency department being evaluated. We had to play one game without him carrying us, and I've never felt so vulnerable in my life. I could feel the other team grabbing the collective spirit of our team, ripping it out of our own and chewing it up, and the game hadn't even started yet. My coach explained the situation to the refs, and we had the mercy rule continuous clock put in place as the game began. The game lasted maybe 45 minutes total, but we still lost by 62. I still think about his injury sometimes, wondering if everything is okay now. He was like my rock. He was my angel. I would have given him my bum in a heartbeat if that's what he required. Stay safe, my sweet prince. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.